What's going on, everybody? Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack a Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You know my guest. He's the one and only Sam Monson. You can find him on X or Twitter at PFF_Sam, excuse me. And of course, you can find him on the PFF NFL Pod. Sam, welcome back to the show. How have you been?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. Wish we were talking about a Packers victory, of course, but alas, you don't know what you're going to get from this Packers team in any given week. They might beat the Chiefs. They might make Baker Mayfield look like an MVP. Who knows what's going to happen against Carolina this weekend? We'll talk about that as well. But I'll start with your overarching thoughts on Packers Bucks from this past Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the defense a few times this season, and one of the things we've been saying is that generally it hasn't been terrible, but situationally it has been. Well, this was one where genuinely and generally it was terrible, like across the board. Nothing went right. Everybody got beat. Coverage was horrendous, and they made Baker Mayfield look like an absolute superstar. Not just a perfect passer rating for the game, but it only took him like 3 quarters to put up his season high in terms of passing yards. Just everything he wanted to do worked, and the Packers defense really had no answers for the entire game. So, you know, if you're one of those people that's looking to make a change, a coordinator, and fire Joe Brady, or these are the like this is the game, right?
Yeah, no, you would definitely think so. And, you know, it's so interesting now, back-to-back weeks where the NFC Offensive Player of the Week, Tommy DeVito last week, Baker Mayfield this week, going against this Joe Barry-led Packers defense. To your point, situationally, it hasn't been good all season long. It never really passed the eye test. I kept going back and forth because this one number kept staring you at the face of while they were the number 9 points defense in the NFL coming into this week. And it's like, none of it made sense from a pass defense, run defense, explosive plays, turnovers, like DVOA. You look at any direction you wanted to look at it, it didn't pass the eye test, the sniff test, any test. But there's that one glaring thing. It was like they're 9th in points. And like, I kept going back to like, am I missing something here? Did Joe Barry of all people somehow figure out some crazy cockeyed theory, like NBA level of, hey, we're going to allow all these long twos, but we're not going to allow threes and, you know, layups. Did he figure out something and where the end result is no, it was just bad situationally all year. And now we saw it come to fruition in a lot of situations in one game against a fine offense that's not great. And now that 9th defense is, I think, down to 17th, and everything just looks as we've kind of expected it to look all season long. And to your point, the pass defense in this one was atrocious. I'm curious. I know when I looked at it, I actually thought the defensive fronts and the edge rusher, the defensive line and edge rushers, not too bad of a day, but the inside linebackers, the corners, the safeties, they could not stop anything.
No, in particular, the second level, you know, the linebackers, Quay Walker, I had a really rough game across the board. But you're right, like they made some plays up front. Some of the defensive linemen, the pass rush that's been, I think, the strength of this defense actually did get pressure and cause some problems and create some, you know, potential issues. But the back end just let plays happen anyway, even when that was the case and the ball got, as long as the ball got out, it was going somewhere productive, and that was the problem. And ultimately, the fact that this defense has been overall still okay. I mean, even with this game, like you say, sort of just dropping below league average, that isn't catastrophic either, right? But it's worse than that when you consider that it's all the key moments, right? And at some point, being generally okay in this Joe Barry defense, if you're going to be bad when it matters the most, like being generally okay doesn't matter, right? Like if it's like being the opposite of clutch. If you're going to collapse when it really matters, that's way worse than not being great for most of the game. But then when the game's really on the line, actually turning it on and being great. So, you know, I think the way that this defense is struggling is a particularly bad indictment.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And you mentioned those big moments. And there was so many times in this game too, where they would get the sack and then they'd allow an 18-yard completion or a 24-yard completion the play after. And it was like, well, that sack was great, but it completely got counterfeit a play or two later and ends up not even mattering, which again, on the PFF grade sheet or when we're going through this, it's still a good play for the player,
Right.
but as a defense as a whole, it just immediately gets wiped out. I wanted to ask your opinion kind of from the outside looking in. Were you surprised that Green Bay did not make a change on Monday with their defensive coordinator and maybe go in a different direction for these final 3 weeks, looking for a spark? or were you not surprised that they decided to go status quo?
No, probably not surprised. I think, there aren't too many teams that make that kind of fundamental shift, during seasons. I think it's difficult. Most teams will wait until the end of the year and then figure it out, particularly if you're not, like if you're still sort of in the hunt, if you're still in contention, if it's still only a game or two away from where it needs to be, it's hard to make that decision of, okay, we've seen enough, we got to go. And that's why I think, Mike Tomlin doing it with Matt Canada earlier in the season was a huge departure, particularly for that team. The
Yep.
Steelers don't do that ever for coaches. The last time they fired a coach midseason was back when Burt Bell did it, who was like a commissioner in the 40s or 50s or whatever it was. And he fired himself. Like it's not even as simple as the coach finally got sick. He fired himself. That's how insane and rare it is for the Steelers. So it's not something I think that tends to happen unless the team is completely bombed out of contention and they're just cleaning house. And, the sort of game where, and this, you could argue this was in that same category, but like the Raiders Chargers game, right? Where when you have that kind of game that's putting up historical numbers, you go, okay, that's the kind of game that gets everybody fired. I don't think this was quite in that category. It was just regular bad as opposed to historically bad.
I'm with you. And that was the one thing. The other thing that I will say too, I was looking for signs as I rewatched this game at the end of this game to be like, did the defense ever quit? I don't think they quit. I think they were just bad. And then like, that's not necessarily encouraging for Packer fans, but if you see signs of quitting or immense frustration or just like any of that sort of stuff. Now there have been some interesting stuff. The Jair saga is really odd and bizarre. Now Devondre Campbell had an interesting tweet this week. Like there's starting to see some, signs of some things that may not be going so great. But when I watched it through, there's the very last drive. There's maybe a run on the final play where they get that big explosive where he slides down at the end. But overall, I didn't see this team quit at any given point, which led me to believe they would probably stay status quo and look at this more in the offseason. And I would expect them to go in a different direction come the offseason. I wanted to ask you about that as well, though. One name that's already come up, and I know some people aren't quite thrilled with it because it's the same style of system that Joe Barry is running right now. That's Brandon Staley. That's a really interesting one. He has some connections with Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur seems to want to run this style of defense. It just hasn't exactly gone well. It's not gone well necessarily through the course of the league, but I'd be interested in your thoughts on Brandon Staley, just the defensive coordinator, and if there's any other names out there that would intrigue you if they do in fact go in a different direction.
Yeah, Staley will be an interesting kind of candidate for defensive coordinator jobs once we get to the offseason, because theoretically that's the defense people want, right? It's that Vic Fangio scheme. That is the defense that is number one, kind of in vogue right now in the NFL generally. But number two, it's also the defense that specifically causes problems the most for the kind of Shanahan tree type offenses, which are the ones that are the most successful in the NFL right now. And it's part of why, Mike McDaniel and potentially LaFleur as well, and they're getting these guys in part because I think they think that that's the best defensive system in the NFL, but also to practice against it. Like they specifically want to work against that defense because it's the one that causes them the most problems. So they want to work out the kinks in their own offense against that defense on a regular basis during practice. So they hire these guys like McDaniel going to Source and Bringio to try and make sure that his defense or his offense is at its best. And when you listen to any of those guys talk about their kind of coaching experience and history and development, they all talk about the importance of understanding the defensive side of it as well, and not just kind of working at this from an offensive prism and nothing else. All of these guys talk about how important it was to understand the defensive side as well. And really, that's what makes them so good. So I could definitely see LaFleur wanting to bring in that scheme. And we are only a few years away from Brandon Staley running that scheme to the degree of being the number one defense in the NFL. Now, that was with Aaron Donald and that was with Jalen Ramsey, right? There's a personnel element to this as well. But it was a really good defense when he ran it with the Rams. And it was always a surprising and curious and kind of unexplained thing that he never even got close to doing that with the Chargers, right? Like that defense barely even got better during his time there, let alone started to make inroads towards being the number one defense in the NFL. So I think he's in this weird position now where I don't know what to make of that. Like, is this a guy that you can expect to come in and with better personnel immediately put, a top 10 defense on the field again? Or was the Rams kind of time just a weird confluence of events, and actually he's not capable of doing that anywhere else?
And that's what I'm intrigued by too. My gut tells me that Matt may want to stick with that system for all the reasons that you mentioned. My gut also tells me, if you look at outside of Fangio in Miami, a lot of those coaches running that system have not been super successful this year. As you mentioned, there is a very big, talent element to that as well. You have to pair good players no matter what scheme that you're running. And I think that's clearly been an issue to some extent with the Chargers and obviously in Green Bay. I'd be very intrigued to see if it's just the coordinator, but they're running similar systems and that can make a change and an upgrade in and of itself. I think this is going to need a difference in not only coordinator, but philosophy. We'll see about scheme, but obviously personnel is an issue as well. We just talked about the back end of the defense. There's not a ton of great schemes, as I've been talking about all week. There's no offensive coordinator, quarterback, offensive coach in the world that's necessarily scared about throwing at Quay Walker, Devondre Campbell, Carrington Valentine, Eric Stokes, Keyshawn Nixon in that safety room right now. Like, it's just not intimidating. If you get all pro Jair back, maybe that changes things a little bit. But right now, there's just a lot of holes in this defense. I'm not sure it's going to matter if they don't make some upgrades who the coordinator is, but it certainly can't seem to hurt right now. Any other names on your potential radar for Green Bay?
It's tough for defensive side of the ball because we are in this weird world where there's a bunch of proven guys. I wonder if and this is not a candidate for this job, but I wonder if the success that Brian Flores is having this year in Minnesota is going to start changing that dynamic a little bit, and suddenly teams actually do want to invest more back into those kind of man coverage type systems. And the stuff that Flores is doing is very, very different from that Vic Fangio scheme and that Vic Fangio tree. And it's very different actually from what he was doing himself the first time around, whether it was with New England or Miami when he was the head coach there. And yet it's being wildly successful this year for the Vikings. So in a copycat league, I wonder if teams will use that as a reason and an excuse to start looking back at the guys that are more of that type of defensive scheme in terms of philosophy, which is not where they've been going for the past sort of 3, 4, 5 years.
And that's what I'm so intrigued by too, is it always seems like you want to be on the upswing of whatever new defenses would kind of become in vogue. It almost feels like this, Fangio style is just getting to the point where teams are now really figuring it out and knowing what to do against it. It feels like you almost need to start going in a different direction, or at least getting somebody with new ideas, just like we saw cover 2 go out. We saw cover 3 go out of vogue. Like, once you get these defenses that get figured out, they can go out of vogue very, very quickly. And it seems like you need something new. Brian Flores clearly found something in Minnesota. I'm going to be intrigued, not just what Green Bay does, but how all these openings in the offseason kind of transition. And if there is a new movement with how to, play defense in the NFL, that'll be worth kind of monitoring. I wanted to go back to this week's game. I wanted to go over the tale of two Walkers, if you will. We touched base on Quay a little bit, but I want to start on the offensive side of the ball. Rasheed Walker, left tackle, still in a little bit of a rotation with Yosh Nijman. I'm not entirely sure why, but Rasheed Walker, 88.7 grade this week. I think somebody had posted as well, like, since through week 12, he's one of your, I think, top 10 rated offensive tackles. I'm not a 1,000,000% positive on that, but he, over the course of the past 4 or 5 weeks, he's looked entirely different than he did earlier this year, whether it's just confidence, playing time, the competition with Yosh. I'm not sure what it is, but he had a really nice week this week and has been playing much better football.
Yeah, he did. He was almost perfect in pass protection. The only pressure he gave up was it was a strange kind of play action type of pass protection, where everything slides to the right to make it look like a run play. And he just it's not a normal pass set, So in the course of his footwork there, he basically just, I forget who the defender was, but he bull rushed him, kind of ran right at him and bounced him back a fair bit before he had a chance to try and recover that. And then but that was it. Otherwise, he was basically perfect from a pass blocking standpoint. And then the run game, Logan Hall in particular, he wrecked on a few plays where he either just completely chucked him to the ground or he completely caved him in on one occasion, just dominated him physically. But he won kind of with a mix of power and size and some good footwork and mobility as well. Like, it was a complete all-round performance from it.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see his growth. It was not that way, especially in run blocking at the beginning of this year, and credit him for continuing to grow and get better throughout this season. I'm really intrigued to see if they feel like they have something. I'm hesitant because again, they're still rotating Yash in a little bit at that spot. So clearly, if they just felt like he was the guy, they probably just have him be the
Right.
guy. But he definitely has been playing better football over the course of this past month. On the flip side, the other Walker, Quay Walker, and we kind of talked about already, but a 29.5 grade this week, a 58.4 grade now on the season. He had a 52.0 grade in 2022. He's now ranked 68th out of 80 eligible off-ball linebackers per the PFF system. This has not been trending in the right direction. Now, to be fair to Quay, he has been battling some injuries. He's been in and out of the lineup. I'm sure that's probably affecting him. I did feel like he was playing better earlier in the season than he is right now, and maybe injuries have something to do with that, but it hasn't necessarily looked great for Quay as of late.
No, and he was always a strange draft choice for us. Like he was a guy that had never graded well in college. He was an athlete, and you can see him. You can just pick any play and just watch him. The way he moves around, his size, his explosiveness, his speed. Like he is athletically exactly what you want at the linebacker position. But at some point, you need evidence that they can translate that into actual play, and that's never been there for Quay Walker. And in this game in particular, what stood out to me was the sheer sort of variety of ways that he was screwing up, right? It wasn't like one thing that kept coming up over and over again. It's like every conceivable way you can think of getting beat, he was finding a way to get beat. The first big negative he's got, he just gets whooped one-on-one by Rasheed White out of the backfield, right? Okay, that happens. It's not necessarily a great matchup to linebackers. It was another play down by Tampa Bay's goal line. He reads it really quickly. It's like a power counter play, something like that. There's a pulling a linebacker in this case. He reads it really quickly, scrapes over the top. He's in the hole before the lead blocker is, and then just doesn't attack it. Just kind of engages the guy, and then a tight end is able to drive him completely out of the gap that he's in and open up a huge space for the running back. He gives up another big pass play where he's aligned on the wrong side of the field. There's three receivers to this side. Devondre Campbell realizes before the snap and is like, dude, over here, there's 3-on-2 on this side, and he doesn't even see it. In fact, he takes a step in the other direction once the ball is snapped, and he's completely out of position. Campbell tries to cover and isn't able to make the play. And then there was one other one where he's playing Tampa 2 linebacker again, reads it, like understands this is going to be going to Godwin. It's going to be a post route. I have this. And then just makes a total mess of the angle he takes and neither goes for the ball nor Godwin, and ends up getting nothing. And the ball just goes right where he's supposed to be over his head. It's like, that's like an entire spectrum of ways to lose in the course of 4 bad plays. And that wasn't even the entirety of the number of ways he got beat in the game. So, that's, I think, the real concerning thing. If we just had one fatal flaw, we could potentially scheme around it or, work to avoid those plays or whatever, figure out a way of not having that cripple his game. But if you're just getting beat everywhere in every possible way, like you can't be on the field playing like that.
There's some similarities to Darnell Savage at the safety position where when those guys are going forward and playing fast and just attacking, you can see the athleticism come out. But as soon as they have to sort of start thinking in the open field and diagnosing and reacting and taking the right angles to stuff, everything just becomes a mess. And that's obviously not the trajectory that I think the Packers were hoping for in year 2 out of Quay Walker. You will still see him make plays just off of that raw athleticism from time to time, but you also want to see him develop as a football player with that football IQ, with the instincts. And I haven't seen that from him. I think that's been the really disappointing aspect. Again, some of the playmaking, especially early in the year, was a little bit more there, but the consistency with which he plays with, and again, finding some of those plays, even when they're right there for him, even when he does diagnose it correctly, that's been, like you said, a fatal flaw of his. And I think Green Bay has a lot of questions at some of these positions that they've put high draft picks into, including linebacker. I don't think Devondre is going to be back next year. They have a question mark still in Quay. I don't think Isaiah McDuffie's the answer at that spot. So even though they just invested in that spot with a first-round pick 2 seasons ago, it still remains an issue. And it's almost the exact opposite of what we're just talking about with Rasheed Walker and trajectories. It's just another question mark as this Packers team has to evaluate through the course of the remainder of this year and going into the offseason.
Yeah, I think the most concerning plays were the ones where he read it quickly. Like it would be one thing if we were just a step behind everything and we were late reading the play and then that was your problem. It wouldn't be good either, but at least it would make sense. Like
Understandable.
now the ones that are most concerning is where he's actually reading it well or quickly and then still makes a mess of it. Like that play where he got blocked by the tight end in the run game in particular, like that's one where you would expect him, if he was going to make a mess of that play, you would expect the problem to be he was late reading it, he got out of position, and he was just never in a spot to make that play. He read it fast. He was actually ahead of that and then got blocked by a guy that he should have been able to run right through and stop that run play. Like that's you should have, with your athleticism, like the physical traits that he has, he should have been in position to make that play. He was in position to make that play and still didn't, because he didn't sort of use his athleticism and his strength.
Concerning to say the least. All right, I want to get a couple offensive players out before we get you out of here. The first one, Dontavian Wicks, currently rated the 28th overall wide receiver on PFF's grade. Now, no math major, but I believe there's 32 teams in the NFL. So that would make him a number one wide receiver. Now, I'm not going that far, but I actually kind of wanted to just kind of pick your brain on, is this a player that has the potential to become a legitimate number one wide receiver? Because there's certainly some really fun spurts out of him in his rookie year.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think we're a bit too early maybe to tell. Like I was saying before, Christian Watson had his little breakout before he got hurt, and we got the kind of couple of games of post Thanksgiving Christian Watson where he looked like he was at the tail end of last year. Before that happened, I was sort of saying, look, Dontavian Wicks has earned at this point more playing time than Christian Watson. Like he's the one that's showing what we were waiting for Christian Watson to show, and then we got a couple of games of Watson showing it. But again, now that he's got hurt and we were sort of swung back by necessity to give Dontavian Wicks more playing time, you're seeing it again. And that's really all you can say, is that so far through this rookie season, he has looked like the guy in that receiving core who deserves the most playing time, who deserves the most opportunity, and who has been impressing the most relative to his expectations and chances with the football. So I think all you can do at that point is continue to try and find a way of getting him the ball more and then figure out where the ceiling to this thing is. And I don't know if that's going to be a number one wide receiver, or if it's just going to be another, useful player to have in a receiving core. And actually Watson is the one guy with that potential theoretical number one upside. But either way, I think he's showing that he needs to be like a valuable and consistent part of this group.
Yeah, I think the nice part for Green Bay is they've got some options there with Jaden Reed, Wicks, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs. Even Malik Heath's had a few nice plays as of late. So they've got a well-rounded wide receiver core, and I think it's going to be fun to see who really steps up and maybe even just takes that number one spot and says, hey, I'm going to be the guy. I'm intrigued with Romeo of that group to see if he ends up kind of being as the number 4 guy. And I know a lot of people have been like, well, if Wicks is good, if Reed's good, if Watson's good, where does that leave Doubs? And to me, it's just, there's going to be guys that get hurt like we've seen all season long for Green Bay. You're going to need 3 or 4 wide receivers all season. It's a good position to be in, but they do still need that guy to step up, I think, as a more clear number one overall option. And then that leads me to our kind of our final one today, and that's Jordan Love. And obviously this whole season for Green Bay has been centered around him. He's now PFF's 18th graded quarterback, 17th if you take out the Jake Browning, experience so far, which has been fun, but only a couple hundred snaps so far. But somewhere in that right meaty middle portion of the curve. In your opinion, where does that leave Green Bay and Jordan Love moving forward? It's been trending up, but he's still kind of in that middle area. Would seem that he's trending to be their franchise guy, but how do you kind of see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good thing is, there's a few games left, so they can hopefully add a little bit more data and a little bit more information to the picture. But at the moment, it's kind of like almost in the worst possible place, because he's not clearly the guy and he's not clearly not the guy. He's somewhere in the middle, and that's the dangerous area of, when you get lost in this world of I'm not quite sure whether we have the quarterback or not, you can go years and just sort of years without making that decision and get yourself trapped in this kind of quarterback purgatory world. So I think you're right. It is broadly trending in the right direction. I forget who it was that referred to it as like a stock market, right? You shouldn't focus on the day to day. You should sort of focus on just the broad picture, up or down. And that's kind of what we're seeing. It's broadly headed in the right direction with some weird jumps in either direction over the course of the year. If that continues to keep going up, over the final few games of the season, and we end the year and we're like, yeah, look, the start was rocky. It wasn't always perfect. We were headed in the right direction though over the year. And let's remember this is a young receiving core and an offensive line that was a work in progress and blah, blah, blah. I think you can talk yourself into, okay, he's at least the guy for another year and we can figure it out, reassess this time next year. And if we still haven't improved, then maybe we have a different conversation. But I would say at that point, he's earned the opportunity to show that, let's do it again with a better environment across the board and see what it looks like. If he collapses down the stretch, or if he just reverts and there's no more positivity and it's just, we end up with Jordan Love ranked, 20 something, then the kind of underlying numbers all look vaguely similar in terms of generally inaccurate relative to everybody else, some big mistakes. And then, I mean, you can definitely have the conversation of, is this the guy? But then it's also a case of like, what is the alternative? It's one thing deciding, okay, he's not the guy. We need to start looking for other options, but you're not going to be in a position necessarily for the obvious one. You're not going to be in the same spot that the Bears are, right? Where they have to make the same kind of evaluation. Is Justin Fields the guy? Yes or no? Binary outcome. But then they have, well, then we just draft the guy, number 1 overall. Yeah. So it's easy. The Packers aren't going to be in that situation. They have to answer that question first. Is Jordan Love the guy? Yes or no? But if no, well, now it's like, crap. Now what do we do? Because we don't have the number 1 overall pick. We don't have, a shot at necessarily one of those top guys. It's difficult to find quarterbacks in free agency or trade. They're in a much more difficult spot. So even if they come to the same answer, it just creates a lot more difficult conversations.
I think maybe the single most interesting aspect of the Packers this offseason is to see how they attack this Jordan Love contract situation. He's got 1 year left. They could let him play it out and see how things go for one more season. Or do they get aggressive and do they say, you know what, we believe in him. We're going to give him the contract. It's going to be something long-term. That to me is going to be very, very interesting for Green Bay and how it kind of sets the quarterback market maybe in flux in future years as well. Very intrigued by that. Sam, awesome stuff as always. Thank you so much for coming on. Enjoy talking to you every single week. Tell everyone where they can find the PFF NFL pod and anything else you want to plug.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me. PFF NFL Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. And we're a finalist for the best American football podcast in the Sports Podcast Awards. So we need people to vote. You can find the link on my pinned tweet at PFF_Sam. We would appreciate all the votes we can get.
So I'm now just learning that I am not a finalist for the NFL visits. I'm just kidding. Congratulations on that. That's absolutely amazing. You guys do tremendous work. Make sure to go vote. Follow the pod at PFF NFL pod. And of course, follow Sam at PFF_Sam. Sam, thanks as always. We will see you guys next week. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.